The Problematic Prince. Erna was laid up in bed with a cold for 3 days. When she was able to get up, she could only make it as far as the breakfast table. Fortunately, you have not turned into the ghost of the Grand Duchess of Lichen, Bjorn joked. Erna adjusted her clothes, making a fuss. She wore a shawl over her dress, which was embroidered with various flowers, her favorite being on a brooch. Her hair was loosely braided and tied up with a pink ribbon. She spoke less than usual at the breakfast table, much to the delight of Bjorn, and although she found the energy to come to the breakfast table, she was still emaciated. She emptied her plate of food step by step. "Will you be late again today?" she asked. Putting down the teacup she had been holding for a long while, she looked at her husband, who had finished his breakfast a while ago. Bjorn was about to stand up, but decided to sit back down and leaned back. "What are you thinking, Erna?" he asked calmly. "Why? Even if I were to tell you, you'd just forget." "That's..." Bjorn paused as he noticed the smile on Erna's face. "You think now's the time to be joking on such matters?" "Of course, I would say it more elegantly, but I only feel good when you listen to me." Erna's expression was serious. It seemed like Bjorn was in the doghouse after the way he treated Erna. It was not an unfair assessment. "Then why don't you say it in an elegant way?" "I'll listen to you, Erna," Bjorn said softly. Erna was still drummed up the courage to speak her mind. "I just want to have dinner with you. If you have time." The confidence she finally found was undermined by her hoarse voice, which shattered the elegance in the words. "I will," Bjorn agreed, after thinking for a second. He had no other meeting scheduled for that day, and the good thing about the impatient bald eagle was that they would finish up pretty quickly. "Can you look me in the eye and say that?" Erna said. All notions of cheer was gone from her, and she fixed Bjorn with a stern gaze. Bjorn looked Erna dead in the eyes and repeated what he had said. Satisfied, Erna smiled with relief. "How about tomorrow? I would like to travel with you," Erna said, pushing her luck. "No, I don't want to," Bjorn said. He could see she was in no fit state to travel yet. Erna looked like she had been slapped in the cheek unexpectedly. All her aspirations suddenly dashed on the floor. "Why, didn't you say you would listen to me?" "I did listen to you, and I said no." "Are you trying to make fun of me by treating me like a child?" So I hope you don't still see me as a young girl. You might be 20 now, but you are still younger than me, only by 5 years. It was hard to tell when he first saw this woman, but she can be quite the talker. Even being ill was no hurdle for her talkativeness. Once she started, there was no stopping it. "Why don't you treat me kindly sometimes? Like now, like this? And what else? It would be nice to hear something romantic sometimes." Unable to miss this rare opportunity, Erna found the courage to say so much more. "Romantic?" Bjorn stood from the table and adjusted his coat. He looked like he went back to that same old prince who had just forgotten what they had been talking about. The look on his face stung, as if he was looking down at an immature child. Erna changed her mind about giving Bjorn an example and went out to see him off, like she always did. She ignored his order to go back to bed. It was only fair. He ignored her all the time. What was fair for him was for her too. "See you later," Erna said. "Don't be late." She looked Bjorn in the eyes when she reminded him. Her eyes were big and wide and sparkled as they caught the light of the sun. Bjorn looked back at her and nodded once, before setting the carriage off. He couldn't help but laugh when his route took him past the old cathedral. There had been a little fuss, but in the end, everything was back in its place. Light and fresh, without any unnecessary emotional exhaustion. Bjorn liked the fact that she was an easy and clear woman. By the time he was satisfied that this somewhat impulsive marriage was a good choice, the carriage stopped outside the royal palace. It was late in the afternoon. When the Grand Duchess was having afternoon tea in their guest house, that she received an unexpected visitor. In the parlor, Erna came face to face with a polite man, bowing before her. People lined up behind him, each with a colorful box. "First of all, please have a seat," Karen said, leading Erna to the sofa in the middle of the room. "It's a gift from the prince." Erna's eyes grew wide as she sat, and Karen whispered in her ear. A middle-aged man, who had been waiting, approached as soon as Erna was seated. "It is our honor to present to you Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Lichen, with these wonderful jewels." He bowed again as he spoke clumsily in Lechenian language, as ordered. "We have selected only the very best for you, Your Highness." When he smiled with a face full of pomp and pride, he sent a glance to the others behind him. They had been waiting patiently in the shadows of the parlor. "Please, take your time and choose," as he stepped back. The revealed jewels. Such jewels that were so gorgeous and beautiful enough to make your head wander. "Bjorn," Erna called as soon as he entered the drawing room. Bjorn stopped when he noticed the jeweler was still standing guard outside the parlor. He should have left ages ago. Erna was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by people holding boxes filled with sparkling colors. "You haven't chosen yet?" Bjorn looked at his watch, bewildered. The jewelry had arrived on time, which should have given Erna plenty of time to choose. It would seem the Erna was incredibly indecisive. I just can't do it." Erna ran up to him and grabbed his sleeve. She looked like she was begging him to take her away from this. He couldn't believe she had gotten stuck choosing a simple accessory. "My wife, you must hurry and choose." "I'm sorry, I just can't." "Why?" "I don't know about these things. They all look so beautiful. It's impossible for me to choose one." As she continued to speak, Bjorn could feel his impatience rise, and he was getting angry. Looking at Erna, he could see the confusion on her face, and she would probably cry if he raised his voice even slightly. "If it's that hard for you to decide, then take them all." "No way. That's not what I want at all. Never." Erna flushed. "I already received so many gems when we got married. I couldn't possibly. I'm not that greedy, really." "Erna, can't you pick for me, please?" "I wish that I could, but you see, you have a much better eye for these things than I do, so I know whatever you pick will be the most special jewel." He nodded with his chin at the jeweler who had been watching them, and he came over. "Bring the most expensive one." The jeweler's eyes widened slightly at the prince's command in Felian. He quickly regained his composure and stepped forward with a box containing a blue diamond necklace. "This is a necklace I have made recently. I am proud to say that this is one of the finest and unique gems in Felia." "I'll take that one," Bjorn said. Bjorn had cut off the jeweler before he had chance to finish explaining. He was disappointed at not being able to share the work he had put into it, about how unique the gem was and the fascinating technology used to cut it and set it, but he accepted the prince's request. "A little while ago, what did you say?" Erna asked as she examined the necklace with both fear and joy. "Romantic words." A smile spread across Erna's face. Bjorn studied that smile for a long while. The eyes of his wife were so beautiful that the jewels of Felia could not compare, and they were full of him. Felia was the last country on the tour, so Bjorn had no more duties to fulfill as prince. What remained of the honeymoon was a week of rest. Erna paused at the door, reaching for the doorknob, and looked at her husband. He was laid out on the couch, reading a book, with a half-empty bottle of wine on the table. He had been like that for so long, just like a part of the furniture. She walked across the room to him. Bjorn looked up at her and smiled, then immediately went back to his book. He did not even move his legs so Erna could sit down. She had to make do with another chair. Erna realized that she had been with the prince every day since they got married, had been perfectly healthy, until recently. Bjorn didn't rise from bed until around noon, where he would sit, reclined, reading a newspaper and slowly sipping on some tea. He would get up for some lunch, then would go horseback riding, play cards, or drink. Then he took a nap. Most of the time he spent with her was in bed. "Wow, I hope you didn't sit down so hard you hurt your back," Erna said. "You know best about my back health," Bjorn said unexpectedly. "Is it not boring to lie around all day?" Erna habitually fiddled with the ribbon in her hair. "I'm working hard, Erna." "On what? It doesn't look like you're working." "Resting, conserving stamina, regaining my strength." "Why, what are you going to do?" Something very obscene. He looked at Erna with hooded eyes and a dirty smile. Erna flinched away, pulling her shawl in tight and shifting back into her seat. "We just did that." Bjorn laughed at Erna's reaction and she pouted at him. Not wanting to speak anymore, she cast her eyes down to her hands. Whenever he had that grin on his face, the corners of his mouth pulled up just so. She went numb. All thought disappeared and only the thumping of her heart remained. Erna rolled her eyes about the room until the heat in her cheeks faded. All her senses were directed at him, and she could only hear the turning of pages and a low chuckle. She hated the fact that she still reacted in such a manner, even at the smallest hint. After a while, she was able to look at Bjorn again without feeling her cheeks flush and her heart race. He was bathing fully in the sunlight, and she could see through his shirt to the beautiful body underneath. Erna quietly approached him and lifted the hem of her dress. It kept falling. "What are you doing?" Bjorn turned his gaze from the book to Erna. "The gown is being weird," Erna said in a small whisper. "Do you not like wearing it?" Erna continued to fiddle with the hem of the dress. Bjorn eventually put the book down and leaned over, dropping the hem of the dress Erna had been fiddling with. Shocked, Erna opened the front of her gown and tried to hide her face, as if she just saw something she really shouldn't. The straps of the dress were done up tight, and the whole thing became a tangled mess. It looked like Erna had been done up in a bow. "Have you come to refill your stamina?" Bjorn asked. Bjorn grabbed her around the waist as she tried to return to her seat. Erna lost her footing and fell onto his lap. He suddenly lost interest in the book he had been reading and let it drop to the floor. He gently stroked the back of Erna's head, who he held gently in his arms. "We have only a week left," Erna said. "Isn't it sad to spend all day stuck indoors like this? Do you still have something you wish to see in the city? Was the sewers not interesting enough?" "It's not that." Her shawl flowed to the floor. Over the book dumped on the floor. "We haven't done very much together, so why don't we go out together this afternoon?" The ribbon that had her hair tied up quickly followed the shawl and rested on the floor. Before Erna realized, Bjorn was unbuttoning her gown. Erna frowned and started to wriggle, but Bjorn adjusted his seating position while holding her. "If we go out, what are we going to do?" Bjorn said, stroking Erna's hair. "I don't know. Let's just look around the city together," and Bjorn's hands slowly made their way down and cupped Erna's chest. She felt numbness come to her mind, and she couldn't remember the rest of what she was going to say. "And buy a gift. I want to buy a gift," she said with renewed strength. If she let this continue any further, she would have wasted another day stuck in the bedroom. "A gift?" Erna nodded vigorously, knowing she couldn't miss this opportunity to do something more. "A gift for my grandmother. Just get Karen to do it." "No, I want to do it myself, can I?" Erna pleaded. Although Erna is mostly docile, she had a way about her, a tenacious spirit that would always rise to the surface when she wanted to get her own way. She looked at Bjorn with big, sparkling eyes and a hint of a pout. She looked like she was about to cry at any moment. Bjorn nodded and Erna's face lit up again. "Thank you," she said and wrapped her slender arms around his neck. "You know, once I got to know you, I could see that you are a much nicer person than you first seemed." "Me nice, are you okay?" Bjorn laughed. Even though he was overly generous with describing himself, he would never have called himself nice, but Erna nodded confidently. You have always helped me when I needed it the most. Anytime I get upset, you seem to do your absolute best to cheer me up. You might not think it, but you are really good at the things you put your mind to and you know your limits. Whether you're playing cards or speculating on horse racing, you play to win. Bjorn felt like he had heard those words before, but not in a nice way, from Leonid. He always said that Bjorn was cursed to die from alcohol poisoning across a cards table, but Erna said it as if it were something to be proud of. Don't forget you, Erna. You're working exceptionally hard too. Me? Her eyes twinkled. What about me? She felt a blush of embarrassment. You have a beautiful face, he said, kissing her rosy cheeks. And a beautiful chest. He kissed her chest, even as he massaged a breast in his hand. And a beautiful. Erna's bright smile narrowed as Bjorn went through his list, and as his hand made its way down her front, she quickly kissed him to stop him from uttering the next words she didn't want to hear. Bjorn giggled through his lips as he returned her clumsy kiss. She was now frowning a lot, but he thought it was cute. Lisa finally got the chance to show off everything she had learned from reading countless magazines and perusing shop windows. Erna rarely wore any proper clothes, so when this mission came to her, right when she was getting bored, she jumped at the chance to dress Erna for her date. The Grand Duchess, the country bumpkin princess, was going to show everyone that she was more than just a rural girl with a rural maid. The results will be the most satisfactory. When she was done, she wanted to take a picture so that she could remind the prince of how beautiful his wife was. Go ahead, Erna. The wicked prince broke Lisa's heart once more. When going out as a couple, it's proper to do things together. What a horrible husband to make his wife travel all this way just to be left alone in a mall. Lisa ground her teeth. Could this be happening? Was the prince really going to break Erna's heart like this? Yes. Okay. By the way, Bjorn. Erna's eyes wandered the crowded lounge of the department store before returning to rest on Bjorn's face. The book he brought to read was already open on the table. Can I ask for some advice? Erna said. Advice? Bjorn replied, not looking up from the book. I want to get the royal family a gift, but I have no idea what to get them. She had been thinking on this little problem all the way to the department store, but had no idea what she was going to get. She thought it would be better if Bjorn was there with her, but it seemed like he had no mind to do any shopping together. Well, I'm sure if there was something they wanted, they would just go out and get it, Bjorn said absently. Erna looked about the lounge of the department store, feeling a sense of loss. The department store far outshone the one she used in Schuber. It was a bright, colorful place, filled with well-dressed men and women. People were sat, having tea at a table around a palm tree, and from somewhere, the sound of trickling water. The sunlight shone in through tall windows and further doubled the atmosphere of peace. At first glance, they did not seem like the grand ducal couple from Lichen. Bjorn didn't like bringing too many people about with him, creating a fuss of people who would just hustle and bustle around him. He liked it peaceful. Erna liked this fact. It made her feel like a proper married couple, just out spending time together, but that just seemed like a pipe dream right now. Well, what gift would you like to get? Money? Bjorn nearly answered immediately, without giving it much thought. Useless. Erna stood up from the table, calm. Before passing through the entrance of the lounge, Erna involuntarily turned around. Bjorn was still just sat, reading his book, turning the page and sipping the tea he had just been served. Bjorn had finished his book by the time he realized Erna had not come back yet. He was getting bored and stood up from the table. Where's Erna? The attendants that were close by quickly followed him. I believe Her Highness is still looking around on the third floor. Bjorn nodded and turned for the stairs that led up to the third floor. Many eyes turned to consider him, and even though this was a department store that catered to the nobility, it was very unlikely that anyone in Philia would recognize him. Even if they did, they would not harass him. It's not polite. As he reached the third floor, he slowed his pace and looked about. The department store was circular in construction, with a void down its middle so that you could see across an entire floor without much getting in the way. "We will find the Grand Duchess, Your Highness, and then—" there she is," Bjorn said, pointing. There was a woman in a red dress, standing in front of a store on the opposite side. She was too far to get a good look at her face, but Bjorn didn't doubt his vision. Erna had been pacing in front of the store for a while, before finally deciding to go in, just as Bjorn reached her. He looked at the shop sign. It was a crafts center. "Are you planning on learning how to draw?" he muttered. At that moment, Bjorn thought about the red-haired man that Erna had planned on running away with in the middle of the night. The aspiring painter. Bjorn paused for a moment and looked at where Erna had been standing. He gripped his cane with a tight fist briefly. By the time his attendants caught him up, exchanged puzzled glances, and Bjorn stepped off again, making to enter the store, but Erna was already on her way out. Bjorn, there you are." She greeted her husband with a warm smile. "I was just about to come back. I am done shopping. Did you finish your book?" "Yes," Bjorn said, escorting his wife. The moment dropped into an awkward silence, and the smile Erna had been wearing faded a little. So she broke into a long-winded version of how she picked out all the gifts. Bjorn listened moderately. It was an evening of no special note. After leaving the department store, they took a short walk along the river and had dinner. Erna smiled brighter and brighter with each passing moment, right up to when they rode the carriage home. Bjorn watched her as she described all the places she had explored before. She was mesmerized by the scenery that flowed past the carriage. The flowers and feathers in her little, brimless hat fluttered in the slight breeze from the open window. Bjorn tapped on his cane as he peered out the window at where Erna was looking. Fancy buildings, gas lamps, and people. It was just like any other city. He felt strange, watching Erna speak so fondly of the ungodly landscape of the winter city. It wasn't really a problem, but for some reason it still bothered him. When the irritation reached its peak, the cathedral bells rang. She sat back from the window and laughed with the joy of a child. She felt the embarrassment of that day come rolling back. The sight of her from that day softened his heart. "Do you want to go up again?" Bjorn asked. "No. Once is more than enough." She looked at him with docile eyes. "Still, there must be a reason why everyone else does. It just seems like a whole lot of extra effort." When he smiled, Erna smiled back at him. His heart felt lighter and Bjorn relaxed deeper into his backrest. They can come back here anytime. They were a married couple after all, and they would be sharing many, countless seasons together.